Well, can you believe that we are already halfway through this class? And if you are doing your work, I know that you are doing great. It might not feel like it to you right now because so much of this is really new and unfamiliar to you. But in this class, it isn't about perfection. It isn't even about having to know it all already. This really is a steep learning curve here for you, and so it's just about learning and becoming more familiar. And in the next class, we will continue to build upon that. So, again, if you're doing your work, you are doing great. Now, I know that you're receiving a lot of feedback from me, a lot of remarks from me. Please do not get overwhelmed by that. This is just to help you to begin to process. It is a lot of critical thinking skills that you are having to develop and use, and that's okay if it isn't all clear for you right now. I'm here with you and for you on this journey. So again, if you're doing the work, you're doing a good job. So let me again start this week with housekeeping things. So my first thing that I want to address is actually about my feedback. So in the feedback, I really do have two purposes for that. One is the first purpose is to really give you feedback about the assignment itself. So, say for the experimental assignment, creating an experimental research. I gave you feedback on that specifically about the dynamics of the creating an experimental research itself versus, say, a different kind of study. Such as if you actually didn't catch and or missed or misunderstood what an experimental research is, I gave you feedback on that. And then I also attempted to give you feedback as a bigger picture if you're actually considering that for your study, just simply because it gives you an idea of both of those. So I apologize if I didn't clarify that to begin with, because I know some of you are feeling a little overwhelmed and concerned, but please don't. Again, this is a learning curve and a learning process for you to just become more familiar with things. It will continue to clear up. By the way, let me just say for the experimental research, I think the biggest obstacle that I found for some of you was just simply understanding what an experiment is. Where you have this intervening variable that you are actually taking initiative to put in there and then to measure its effects. And so some of you actually did observational studies where something is already going on and you're just observing it without actually including something that would intervene in that. So, anyways, again, it's just a learning process. You will continue to learn more as you go along with that. But the feedback, know that if you are not intending to do conduct your own research in that specific area for that design that you created, then you can disregard the overall feedback on that. However, it may be helpful for you for other studies as well. Hopefully that it will be. The next thing I want to say to that I had stated several times, that when you create and you submit an assignment on a created research, such as your experimental, then this last week you had a qualitative study to do. And then the next week you will submit it on your discussion board for your peers to discuss with you. Now, I had stated that you posting it on your discussion board, I would grade it according to how you looked at the feedback and took my feedback into consideration before you posted it on Wednesday on the discussion board. Last week, as I had stated, we had just moved into our new house and I was extremely far behind, and I apologize. I did not get the those assignments graded in enough time for you to be able to have to adapt those. And so because of that, I know a couple of you had contacted me, but overall, generally, your grades were not affected by my lack of ability to get it completed on time for you. So I do intend to have your last week's assignments graded by the time you have to have it on the discussion board for this week, for awareness of that. And so, so anyways, again, it was not affected by that. The next thing I want to kind of address here for a moment, remember in this class, you're not just a student. You're not just doing assignments. You want to begin to think as a researcher. And what I mean by that is one of the things when we are a researcher and then we are communicating our research, which this is in any area that you actually do communication, whether it's written communication or oral communication, is to recognize who your audience is. Who are you writing to? Who are you speaking to? So, in what I noticed, one thing that I noticed, even putting whether it's on the discussion board or in your assignments, like for last week, it was discussing, the different ways in preparation for your qualitative assignment, created study, and it asked about your research question. But a number of you did not put your research question in there to begin with. And what that is we often have holes in our communication because we're already familiar with what our understanding of everything is. But remember your audience, they need to know what your research question is before you begin to discuss your research question. So making sure that what you're familiar with, that you don't just assume that others will know, but that you actually write it out or you actually state your research question if you were communicating that orally. You'll find also that we often have holes in our communication, just simply because we are so familiar with a subject that we miss speaking that out to others, just different pieces of it because we assume they already know. So think about it. Your audience right now is myself as the instructor, and I certainly don't know every one of your topics. Nor, and right now you can change the topic for your created research methods. But as well, I'm not going to know your topic that well, and I can't assume I know what your question is. The same way with each other. When you post it on the discussion board, you need to be sure that you are communicating in a way that says, my audience does not know what I'm coming in here with, and so I need to be sure and state that. As you begin to do your own writing, that will become more evident when you do your own research and writing for it. So one way to practice really becoming more aware of, am I missing things? Am I not communicating what I need to? Is that we write out what we want, and then we kind of step back for a few minutes, and then we come back in and say, okay, I'm going to read it as if I'm someone that has no clue. Someone else has written this, and I'm going to read it. What questions would I have? Would I understand what they said, or would I have to go look up something, or would I have to ask more? So that is really a very good test on how you can become much more aware of your writing, and what you're communicating and what you're actually missing. So be sure and be practicing that, because you do need that, especially when you get into the next two courses. Then let me also state too that a couple of people missed, like even in preparation for the qualitative study this last week, when it came to where you're going to have a sample, your population, all of that. And several of you stated you were just doing searching in literature. You were not actually conducting a study. So let me explain here. When you go to look for literature, you will find literature that either has a full study conducted in it, or you will find literature that has um, basically a literature review. They have reviewed a number of different literature and they've written a literature review. If it does not have a full research component in it, that they have conducted their own literature, this means that it's just a literature review. So when you are creating a study, you are expected to create a full study, not just a literature review, as if you are proposing to conduct this study. Now, in reality, you're not going to have to do the study, but you have to do a proposal, create a research study as if it's a proposal for an entire study, which means that you have to go beyond the literature for participants, sampling, all of that. If you have questions on that, please let me know. Um, the other thing about that is you will hear sometimes um, saying literature review versus reviewing literature. Now, the difference in that is we review literature that's already been done in order to write a literature review. So again, it's a little bit of a play on words, but they do have two different meanings. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I don't know if you're misunderstanding if you don't ask me. So then um, the other thing, basically, as I said, you don't need to actually conduct research. Several of you, it looked like it showed that you had conducted it. Great job with that, but just know in future that you don't need to do that. So that's some things on this last week. Also, I want to say your annotated bibliographies. It looks like you're doing a really good job. Now, just awareness again that you do need to be sure and have the date on each of those. If you have not put those in there, and just being aware that I will give feedback on that for individual purposes, but you are adding into it this week. So you will need 6+ for this. And again, this does need to pertain to the area that you want to be researching in your next course. It doesn't have to be specific regarding a specific research question, but it does have to pertain specifically to your topic of interest that you're considering. You definitely want to do that so that you will be prepared for the next course in which you will actually be reviewing all of that literature in a much greater depth in order to be able to write your literature review. So any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Now, for this week, we are creating a descriptive research study. A descriptive research study is a study that is basically you are not unlike the experimental where you are putting in an intervening variable that and measuring its effects. You are not doing that at all here. So a descriptive study basically you are observing it in its natural. You are, for the most part, you are not attempting to control any variables in any way. There are, let me go through these, some descriptive, some characteristics of descriptive research is that it is a quantitative research method primarily that attempts to collect quantifiable information for statistical analysis of a population sample. It also has uncontrolled variables in it. And those variables are not influenced by the researcher in any way. Um, and then another is that they're often cross-sectional studies, which means that in descriptive research, that something is studied with a certain population in which it can be studied across at a certain time, which can be studied then across other populations as well. Um, and then the final one for a characteristic of descriptive research is that it is often a basis for further research down the road. I will come back to that in just one moment there. Um, but in the meantime, I want to say that there's also three distinctive methods for conducting descriptive research. Three distinctive methods. One is surveys, another is case study methods, and another is observational method. So you have three main methods in which descriptive research studies are done. Now, I want to go back again to the basis for further research, as well as I want to give a little more sample on this, just to see, do something a little different to see if that's more helpful for you when creating these. So I am going to use the book Creswell's Research Design here. It's qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods approaches. And this is actually the 4th edition. Now in here, I want to use this so that I can actually go through some of these for you and with you. So he talks about descriptive and inferential questions when it comes to descriptive designs. And he states that descriptive questions actually you want to examine the relationship um, between you've got independent variables and you have non-independent variables is what you have. And so what he does in this example is that he uses the independent variable of critical thinking skills, and he uses the dependent variable of student achievement, or grades is what he uses in a science class for 8th grade students in a large metropolitan school district. So again, the independent variable measured is critical thinking skills, and the dependent variable measured is the grades, or the student achievement. And it's in a science class project. So he says you can do simply descriptive skills, or descriptive questions, such as he has, how do the students rate on critical thinking skills? Again, you're observing, remember? So the descriptive question here focuses on simply the independent variable. Or you can do, what are the students' achievement levels, or their grades, in the science classes? That's a descriptive question that is focused on the dependent variable. He also has, what are the students' prior grades in science classes and their critical thinking skills? Let me back up on that one. That one is a little too complex for you right now. So we'll stick with the first two. One, he showed how you could write a descriptive question based on the independent variable. And then he showed how you could write a descriptive question based on the dependent variable. And then remember, I stated that one of the characteristics of descriptive research is that it gives a basis for further research. So here he says you can take these descriptive research questions and then you can go on to create a hypothesis, which they call inferential questions. So another place then that you could do a descriptive research question is, he says, for inferential questions, how does critical thinking ability relate to student achievement? This is where he relates the independent and the dependent variables together. And I think there was one more there. Well, we'll go ahead and leave it at that. So basically, the whole point is that you find and you discover, not discover, you create a descriptive question that creates an observation that gives the quantifiable information that you're looking for in that population. And then you can take it further and create inferential questions that show a relationship and the extent of the relationship between the independent and the dependent variable. Now, with all of that said, I know that this can be really very difficult to understand, especially if you're not familiar with research and you're not used to looking for what is dependent variables versus what is independent variables, and that's okay. We are getting there. The independent variable is the variable that does not change. So, like the critical thinking skills, that in that example, that does not change. What does change are the students' grades in their ability, what they achieve. That is measured and that is affected by the critical thinking skills that they have opportunity for. So just know that the independent variable is the one that stays constant. The dependent variable then is the one that changes and is influenced by the independent variable. Um, Again, that is a little complicated, but it's okay. And if you get it mixed up, even as in some of the things with the experimental and the qualitative study, that's okay. It's really that you begin to learn and to understand it more, and just know that we will build up on that. In this course, you do not have to make any decisions on your own research. And hopefully, as you're going along and you're asking questions and I'm giving you feedback, it will help you to kind of look at more what is it that I might want to do. Um, the other thing is even on your topic approval, you have a research question on there. Now, when you get, as many of you are finding, that maybe that question has already been answered, but you're not aware of that right now. You're not sure of that. Hopefully, as you are doing your annotated bibliography and you're reading some of this, or at least skimming it for the basic parts, you're going to find that, wow, this question's probably been answered already. So what more might I ask there with that? Um, just know that I know your question is going to shift some as we go even into the next course. But the main thing is to, by the end of this course, is to have something that's somewhat solidified, that you have a real direction, you have a real effort and ability to be able to do that, to conduct that study. And then as you do the literature review the literature so that you can do your literature review. That in there is where you're going to really be able to hone in and really solidify your actual research question. Now, the difference between a slight shift and a major shift is a slight shift is you're still in the same vicinity of topic, and all of that. A major shift is that I thought I was going to do in counseling, and now I'm going to do in baseball. Not a realistic study for here, but you know what I mean. There is that it has to be within that same area, because otherwise you would have to start all the way back over to refigure all of that, as well as redo all of your annotated bibliography for your literature, and we do not want that. So one last thing I want to say, uh, if some of you have already scheduled a time just to visit with me regarding your ideas on your topic of interest that you might want to study yourself, all of that. That's great. That's wonderful. I want to encourage all of you as we're moving along at some point, either through the office hours, the instructor office hours that's on the announcement page, or at the bottom of my emails, usually there's a link there to my Calendly that you can go in there and schedule a time at your convenience that's available there for you to sign up, and let's talk about it. Let's see what you've got going there, and let's just process and just know that that's okay. So any questions, concerns, please contact me. Otherwise, I do hope you had a great Thanksgiving. It was quiet here for me, and which was good for my husband and I, and stuff. So I hope it was a great Thanksgiving. I hope you had a good break there. I'm sure not long enough, but otherwise, I will see you on the discussion board, and I will talk to you soon. All right. Bless you. Bye bye.